Thanks everyone for taking the time to watch this presentation for our class in social linguistics. This is presented by myself, Eric Ian Rodriguez. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the topic gender and age. But first, let's get into looking at what is on the agenda within this presentation. So, without further ado, within the presentation, we have the presentation outline. I will first define gender and age. What is the relationship between gender and language use, as well as answering how men and women use language. So, gender is the range of characteristics pertaining to and differentiating between femininity and masculinity. This is the main concept of gender. This is to say that gender is male and female. However, we are not specifically looking at gender in terms of femininity and masculinity, as in man and woman. However, what we are looking for, what we want to focus on is what is the relationship between gender and language use. So, the concept of gender is one of the most fundamental rules of syntax and structuring in language. An example, as you see, Spanish. All nouns have a gender and sentences must accommodate that gender as an absolute rule. So we have different words in English. When we change them to Spanish, we have like sky, the cielo, and male, and el cielo. Beach, playa, female, la playa. Wind, viento, male, el viento, etc. As you can see, there are some subtle differences the way men and women use language, which vary depending on the language and culture. For instance, some studies note that female speakers of Chinese speak more quietly and in more passive voice than male speakers. Now, just keep in mind, we have to take into consideration that these differences have not been fully documented and consistent in other languages. Now, the Holmes, he says, women and men do not speak the same way as each other in any community. And this is absolutely true because, take for example, let's just travel the world. Okay, let's go on and travel the world for a little bit. And we're going to talk a little bit about, for example, Japan. Okay. In Japan, people such as the people in Japan, the Japanese, they have a way of demonstrating their authority by utilizing words that are much more formal and vulgar than women, right? And which is in a society reflecting social status or power differences are often just one aspect of more persuasive linguistic differences in gender language usage variation. So, which pretty much means that this is called gender exclusive. Okay, so where the language is used by men and women very specifically. Okay, so there are, like I mentioned prior, there are subtle uses of the language that men use and uses of the women that women use. Now, let's head a little bit further south of Japan, and you'll find the Chukchi people. The Chukchi people language is made up of two gender-based dialects, one for men and one for women. The difference between the two dialects are mostly phonetic. For example, women typically substitute the ts sound for ch and the so I do believe this is pronounced Ramkitchen, which means people, and is pronounced as written by men as, you'll see here, Chaskisten. Now, hate me if you will, can't pronounce that correctly, but this is pronounced by the women, so you can see the subtle differences between how it would be said by men and yet how it would be written by men and how it would be said by women. So this is called gender exclusive, right? And so if we continue further, we'll go into a little bit of the Yanyuwa people. Now, Now, the Yanyua is a critically endangered indigenous language spoken on a small island off the coast of Australia. So, like I said, a little bit further from Japan. And it has separate dialects for men and women. For example, here's how the sentence, "the little boy went down to the river and saw his brother," would sound if a man was saying it. Now, um, here we go. Let me try saying this here. Um, Nya buye nya ardu kiwa winka wakalia wulangindu kanyilu kala nikun ya baba. And here's how it would sound if the woman was talking. Buyu ardu kawinga winka wekalia wulangidu kila kala niku baba. So you can see that when a man would say, there are many different linguistical features that are being used in order to simply say the little boy went down to the river and saw his brother, rather than how a woman would say it, which is quite shorter, and they say it quite differently. So quite a difference, isn't there? Now let's head on over to the Caribbeans. Right, just a little bit further down, we have the Caribbeans. And there is also what's called the Garifuna people. Excuse me. Now, just a little history on these. The Garifuna people currently live in Central America, but they originally come from the Caribbean islands of Saint Vincent and Dominica. So, a little history about them. Long before the Europeans discovered those islands, they had already been the sense of a brutal conquest. The people who originally made their homes there were what they're called the Arawakan and spoke an Arawakan language, but groups of the Carib warriors conquered them. They pretty much killed most of the men and took women as wives. So the women spoke what's called Arawak to their children, but their fathers taught the boys their Caribbean language once they were old enough to help with work. Over the time, two separate sets of vocabulary evolved. As women's vocabulary made up of mainly the Arawakan words, and the men's vocabulary, which use Carib loanwords for the same concept. Okay, so again, we're looking at how both male and female are using linguistic features differently. Now, let's travel back to the US for just a little bit. Now, in the US, um, traveling back to the US of A, for women, where, where we are going to talk about language variations of the male and female. So, in the United States, there are various ways that men and women demonstrate their gender. And for women, as by nature or neutral law and feministic world, only the females do such things. They do um, what's called a vocal fry. Okay, a vocal fry is quite typical in teenage years of adolescence that use this particular speech pattern, whereas males, we do not have this particular way of speaking. Take a moment and listen to this video for just a second, please.
There's an epidemic in America. Epidemic. It affects young women. Young women. And that is vocal fry tones. Ugh, gross. Hi. So, what's going on in this country is something that really irritates me. And that is vocal fry tones, especially heard with young teens or people in high social groups. No, stop it. Hi, Abby Normal here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about vocal fry tones. Vocal fry tones are actually a vocalism that will allow people, especially baritones and basses, who want to sing really low tones to be able to get those out. You'll hear them in some really low bass parts. How you get it is by allowing small puffs of air to flow through your vocal cords. Unfortunately, it's become some sort of weird mode today to show your affiliation with basically an in crowd by especially women to use these vocal fry tones, and it is not good for their vocal health. This creaky vibration is becoming really popular, not only in vocal singing like Britney Spears, hey yeah 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 yeah, that sort of thing. It's become something that you add to your speech pattern, and it's really not good for your throat. Um, this sort of vocalization can cause more harm to your throat because your vocal cords aren't smoothly rubbing together. They're more clapping. It's like whispering. Instead of a nice even flow, you are creating more friction on your vocal cords. Plus, it's completely irritating. It happens most often as a learned behavior, something that people do in order to get along with a group. It can happen, this sort of action happens with accents or even vocal speech patterns. Say, if, like I'm doing right now, if someone always ends their sentence in an upward glide, then a lot of people who are talking to them also do it. And this glotalization, this fry tone, irritates the living crap out of me. So I would like to please tell the young women of the world, or people like high-end fashion designers, to please stop trying to sound sophisticated or cultured by putting a vocal fry tone in your sentences.
Okay, so as you can see, these are called vocal fry tones, and only females have this tendency to do this. Yes, there are males that do this, but quite typically it's used when you're in the higher upper class of society. You'll see those people that they'll tend to talk with this classification of tones of the rich folks. That's how they tend to speak. So this is called, again, vocal fry tones. And again, this right here is a classification of only females tend to do this, and quite typically at the younger age, and during the adolescence of teenage years. Now, language variations in male and females differ quite tremendously because females, as you can see here, on the top portion of this little chart, you'll see that females think differently than those, as you see, males below, how men think, right? Females tend to use words that will be more kind, loving, cherishing, emotion, very emotional, love and exciting. Oh, so cute and so adorable. And these are the kinds of things that the language variations in females use. When in males, you'll see that, well, males don't do that. We have a totally different form of thinking. As you can see, think about governments or the football or video games and vulgars. We express ourselves a whole lot more in the sense of words that are quite direct and to the point. So this right here also can demonstrate the language variations between male and females and how it is that we speak, what words that us males use, and what words that females use. And so this right here, so again, when it comes down to males using language, as you can see, again, at the top, females have the tendency to be expressive with their feelings in a way that is kind, loving, sympathetic. And if you take a moment, look again at the bottom portion of that little chart, you'll see again that males are less likely to beat around the bush. In other words, males have the tendency to be more vocal with their feelings in a matter that isn't always kind. So, And in the nature in which males tend to think, you'll see that males don't think the same way as females do. So regardless of the fact that males and females both speak the same language, the conclusion is both parties, in fact, speak differently. And this is, again, all around the world. Everywhere is very different. They use many very different kinds of linguistic variations to say some things where the males will have to use a different kind of form. Japanese, they tend to say, for example, if they like say Daniel, and Daniel is a child, we'll say Daniel-san. Son at the end in order to iterate that child, that's a person that's at the underage. So they'll use different kinds of features in the language or in words that will directly say if it's a younger person, if it's an older adult, if it's what's the classification between people. So thank you guys very much for taking the moment again, for taking a look at this. I hope this really broadens out your knowledge and understanding the concepts between the ages of how people use language and linguistic features and certain age groups. And if you have any questions, please send them my way. Here are my references, guys. Have yourself, guys, a wonderful day. Bye-bye.